Welcome to Front Office Pros. Today, we're going to be talking about dynasty moves to make for contending teams. Joe and I have got two each, so be prepared.
Hike!
All right, Joe, so why don't you start us off with your first dynasty move to make for contending teams?
My first move to make, Steve, for contending teams is going to be go ahead and buy Deontay Johnson. The keep trade cut value is so tight end premium, also super flex rankings. He's the 120th overall, and he's listed as the wide receiver 47. And some similar guys around him. You got Marquise Brown, Christian Kirk, Adonai Mitchell, and Chris Godwin. And if I was a contending team, I'd much rather go with the upside of a guy like Deontay Johnson, who is going to be, the number one wide receiver on the Carolina Panthers. And honestly, I think them go ahead and getting Deontay Johnson, I think is going to be a big reason why I expect Bryce Young to be able to take that step forward. He's just such a great route runner. And I think Dave Canales is going to figure out how to utilize him and get him in the open space and just be a quick, easy find for Bryce Young.
So why a contending move versus a rebuilding move? Guys a little bit younger, could develop in that Carolina offense. Any reason why you feel like it's more of a contender move versus a rebuilding move?
I mean, he's 20, he is going to, he's 20, 27, 28 years old. So, I mean, he's not the youngest guy, especially compared to, talking about Adonai Mitchell, who's in the similar range, coming in as a rookie. So I don't know if he's the type of guy that you can really, that you'd want to rebuild around, but I think he's a nice piece to add onto your team, if you're looking to contend.
My only concern with him, and I know you're a Deontay guy, but they've got that receiver starting to get pretty big. I mean, they take Xavier Legette, they've got Jonathan Mingo, they've got Adam Thielen, they've got Deontay Johnson. It's like that room is getting bigger and bigger and bigger. So it's like, who's going to emerge out of that group? It probably is Deontay, but I don't know if it's a guarantee.
Yeah, I mean, it might not be a guarantee, but I definitely think he's the. I'm not, Mingo doesn't really scare me. He had a pretty disappointing rookie year. We'll see if he does take another step. I mean, Thielen at his age just can't be the one. So I think right now, right away, Deontay Johnson's got to be the one. But it'll be interesting. But I think just the way that the Steelers were able to utilize him and just pepper him with targets, I really feel like they would utilize him in the same fashion.
So my first move for contenders to make is to go ahead and trade for quarterback Aaron Rodgers, a guy who, looking at the values, this guy is at the absolute seller. I mean, I understand a little bit why, because of, what happened last year with the Achilles injury, him being so old, and because it's Dynasty, people are very age conscious. And who knows how long he's going to play. He probably only plays another year, but there's no denying that the Jets have done a lot to bring talent into that room. They've upgraded the offensive line. They brought in Mike Williams. They drafted Malachi Corley. They got Breece Hall. There's a lot of weapons for Aaron Rodgers. Let's not forget how excited we were a year ago with all of this. So, I mean, looking at a couple trade value charts, I mean, he's at, he's in the realm of a Geno Smith, Daniel Jones, a 2026 early second, and keep trade cut Justin Fields is ahead of Aaron Rodgers. And at our, another comparable over at Draft Sharks, he's got, Aaron Rodgers is below Derek Carr, Geno Smith, and Baker Mayfield at a 9. You're talking about giving a third or fourth round pick for this guy. To me, it's hard to believe. I feel like you're going to have to give a little bit more for that. But if I'm a contending team, why not take the gamble? Roll the dice. Doesn't seem like you're going to have to give all that much. And you got a guy who's got immense upside with that offense. I think that he could be pretty good. So to me, I think it would be a good move to go out and get him.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I'd be, if I was a contending team, I'd be all in on Rodgers. I mean, you see the Jets make the investment in the offensive line. They got a good running game with Breece Hall. They've added, Malachi Corley at the wide receiver room as well to go along with Garrett Wilson. Tight end position is whatever, but Rodgers is there with Hackett. Hackett, he had a ton of success with in Green Bay, so knows the system. And then, like you said, everyone was all on the Aaron Rodgers train last year. Getty's coming off an Achilles, but we only saw 4 snaps out of him. If he's able to stay on the field, I mean, he's definitely going to be, one of the top quarterbacks.
And for those who may say, well, that's a gimme, I'll give you another name, and that'd be quarterback Kyler Murray, a guy who I think is also somewhat of a forgotten man. Now you got Marvin Harrison who comes in, and I think that we've seen what he's been able to do with the likes of DeAndre Hopkins. I think this helps Murray's value quite a bit. Before he was injured these past 2 years, let's not forget he was in the top 10 all three, his first 3 years. So I think Murray, he's got that rapport with Trey McBride now. Now you got Marvin Harrison. They bring in Trey Benson. They've done a lot with this team. Michael Wilson is an up-and-coming receiver. So if you feel like Rodgers is too much of a gimme, I think Murray is kind of a sneaky name because the reality is if you're in a super flex league, quarterbacks are not easy to acquire. It's going to be quite difficult to be able to get one. You're not going to be like, oh, I'm going to trade for C.J. Stroud. Oh, good luck. You got to go for one of these guys who can kind of make that jump up.
Yeah, I mean, given Rodgers' value on, a couple of different sites there, I don't know if he is a complete gimme, and I think a lot of that has to do with just his age on those sites as far as, dynasty rankings. Not sure. Most people just expect him to be there for 1 year, but Murray's another interesting name. I'll be curious to see like how his fantasy value is though, now that he's a little bit older, and I feel like he's not just going to be able to utilize his legs as much, and that's kind of what made him that top 3 quarterback. So curious to see how he could do just more as like a pocket passer at this point in his career.
Are you enjoying this episode so far? Well, if you are, show some support by subscribing to our YouTube channel and following us on Spotify and Apple. We have episodes all throughout the year, so you're not going to miss what we have in store. So, Joe, who do you have as your second dynasty move to make for contending teams?
Yeah, so my second move, I'm going to stay at the quarterback position as well, Steve. I'm going to go with quarterback Dak Prescott. And, the Cowboys, we talked about this the other day on our pod, saying that Jerry Jones is saying that the Cowboys are going all in this year. And I think that what that really means is guys like Dak that are, playing out their final year of their deal, he's just going to let those guys play out the final year of the deal. And then they're going to have to earn by their play on the field in order to get re-signed by the Cowboys, or, maybe the Cowboys to choose not to resign him and they have to go play for another team. But, Dak is going to be 31 by the time the season starts this year, but I still think he's got some good fantasy seasons ahead of him still. And especially this year, how we say with guys going into the contract year like Dak is now, they're going to ball out and look to cash out, whether it's with the Cowboys or a different team. I think he's going to up his play. And, in the NFL draft, Cowboys didn't address the running back position in the draft or really free agency. I know they bring in Ezekiel Elliott, but Tony Pollard's no longer there. It really looks like the Cowboys are just putting the offense on Dak's shoulders and expect him and, CeeDee Lamb to run this offense and flow the offense through those two players. And Keep Trade Cut has Dak Prescott ranked as the quarterback 16 for Dynasty Superflex leagues. And then some guys that are ranked around Dak are, guys like Trevor Lawrence, Brock Purdy, Drake May, and Tua. So, I mean, I think the value's there. And for whatever reason, Dak gets a bad rap. I think it's because he can't get it done in the playoffs or big games for the actual NFL. But he's a pretty good fantasy quarterback, and I think he's better than a quarterback 16 in a Superflex league.
Yeah, I've got to be honest with you. I was a little surprised by that ranking. But I feel like we've ranked quarterbacks before, and we put him somewhat in the middle. So
Right.
and I think at the end of the day, this is a good choice by you. I do think it does come with some risk, but that's a part of it, right? I mean,
Right.
that's why we're saying it's a possible buy. He is a guy who is basically in put up or shut up mode. That's what Jerry Jones has put him in this place. He can't be tagged again. So if he doesn't want to go with the Cowboys, he can hit the market. There's nothing the Cowboys could do to prevent him from going to the market. So, I mean, everything points to him having a similar year he had last year. I thought he was going to have a down year. Everything we heard in training camp was this guy was throwing picks up the wazoo. And then all of a sudden he has a fantastic year. I understand it's preseason, but in that preseason buzz, right, that's when you're trying to prognosticate is this guy going to be a great player or not? I thought he was, and I don't remember where you had him, but so he did really well. The big question will be he lost Gallup. They didn't really bring anybody else in. They have no running game. It's all on Lamb's shoulders. If Lamb gets injured, I think he could be in some serious trouble. But I mean, you could say that with anybody, I presume. But
Yeah.
I just think that the burden on them too is pretty large. They're not really giving a lot of support. Not to mention he doesn't have Tyron Smith anymore, which I don't know if that'll have much of a factor for him.
Well, it definitely could. I mean, we're seeing that Dak's not really running as much ever since that injury that he suffered, early in his career. So he likes to kind of stay in the pocket, and losing a left tackle like Smith's caliber is definitely going to be a tough loss and not easy shoes to fill. So we'll see if the rest of the Cowboys offensive line can afford him the time to throw it downfield to guys like Lamb or Flournoy, as we've talked about in a prior podcast as well.
That's true. Overall, I think that this is a good pick because there's so much mystery surrounding him. He doesn't have the future contract. That brings a lot of, mystery as to what's going to happen to him. So I like the pick, Joe.
Yeah, usually that, brings out the motivation to go out there and put your best foot forward so that if he's not going to be on the Cowboys, he can get paid by somebody else.
I'm a firm believer in the ball out, cash out bank. So I'm with you there. My final dynasty move to make for contending teams is to go trade for wide receiver Curtis Samuel. Although many might shriek in horror when I say that pick, I think that those people are sadly mistaken because Stephon Diggs is no longer in Buffalo. They didn't draft two receivers in the draft, which I was surprised about. They only went with Keon Coleman. And many will think that Keon Coleman, will kind of maybe take over that workload for Diggs. I don't think so. I know they said that he'll play the X. I see him more, let's put it, better than Gabe, and I think in a similar play of Gabe. And I think he could, I don't want to keep him in that box because he could definitely get out of that box. But I just think that that's my expectations of him. I think Samuel's sneaky. I don't think there's enough people that recognize how much he was able to do in Carolina with not really that much of a supporting staff, and he really hasn't had a great quarterback his entire career. Josh Allen will be the best quarterback he's had in a long, long time. Brandon Beane, if I'm not mistaken, that was his first, or I don't know if it was his first draft, but he was I know he was in the Carolina front office. His name is written all over that pick when he was taken in Carolina. Joe Brady loves Curtis Samuel. So it's like they're going to have a plan for this guy. So to me, based on how he plays, I think he might be the it factor guy, other than Kincaid, obviously. But I really like what he can do. And he's a name that really, how excited do you get for a guy like Curtis Samuel? A lot of people don't really talk about him all that much. I mean, if you look at it from a trade value chart standpoint, we're talking this guy is probably 40 and below. This guy's got major flex appeal. I think he could even be a wide receiver too. There's just so many vacated targets. You just don't know what the Bills' offense is going to be, and that's why I'm going to kick the tires with the upside for Samuel.
We've talked about it on prior podcasts. How I feel about him. And I really like the landing spot for the Buffalo Bills here. You mentioned, Joe Brady, who's got connections with back to the Carolina Panthers. But, you mentioned Curtis Samuel not being a name that gets people excited. I get that. But even on the Washington Commanders last year with Terry McLaurin and Jahan Dotson, Logan Thomas at tight end, like Curtis Samuel really got hot there and was fantasy relevant there for, a decent amount of time, even with the weapons. So I think the Bills definitely have a plan for him. They were trying to use Stephon Diggs at the line for those quick screens and even the rushes. That's just not Stephon Diggs' game, but that's the kind of stuff that Curtis Samuel brings to this offense. And I think the Bills are going to find a way to use that versatility. You mentioned the vacated targets as well with Stephon Diggs out the door. They don't really have a true number one wide receiver on this team. So I think that really opens the door for opportunities with Curtis Samuel.
If you had to guess, Not that keep trade cut is the best thing out there to determine value. But if you had to guess where Curtis Samuel's on here, where would you put him?
Well, being that I know Deontay Johnson was the wide receiver 46. So, I mean, Samuel's got to be lower than that. He's got to be, like 58 maybe.
71.
Oh, 71. I mean, that's bottom barrel.
That's a screaming buy.
Yeah.
Screaming buy. I mean, they've got Khalil Shakir at 61, to my surprise.
Yeah, a lot of people are intrigued by Khalil Shakir this year. I mean, thinking that he's going to potentially be the wide receiver 2 for the Bills.
Yeah, but I just think that's very interesting to me. I just think there's enough people overlooking him that he's got major flex appeal. So I would go for him.
Yeah, I think that goes back to, what you mentioned with people not being able to get excited for a guy like Curtis Samuel just because, he's that veteran player. He's been around in the league where, Khalil Shakir could be that ascending young player. He took some strides forward last year. So I think more people can get behind that than, Curtis Samuel, who's kind of been a gadgety type player, and he's a veteran in this league now.
I think, closing out this episode here, I think something you have to keep in mind is if you're going to be talking about a dynasty move to make, especially for contending teams, rebuilding, everything's looked at a different lens. But if you're going to make a move to trade for somebody, there has to be a reason, an outlet, however I want to word it, for you to say, okay, yeah, I'll make a move. Like we talked about. Try making a trade for CJ Stroud. Good luck. It's not going to happen, right?
Yeah.
All these guys, there's something to it. There's something that's like, I don't know. This could go wrong, or, this person might not be that for it. Whether it was Dak Prescott with the mystery of his contract, Curtis Samuel in a completely new role, possibly having to shoulder something that he's never done before, ascending to somewhere he hasn't. Rodgers, can he come back from the injury or not? And he's, older age. Are people really going to go for him? And then you got Deontay Johnson, who, kind of fell off in Pittsburgh, and now he goes to Carolina, which was the worst offense in all of football. So you look at all the players that we talked about, in this episode, all of them have question marks that might make it where it's like, I don't know. So you can't be, you could try, but I just think, try to go for some, if you got other players as well that you're thinking about, hey, I'd be curious, should I go for them? Put them in the comments below. We'd be happy to give you our advice. We only talked about, 4 or 5 guys. There's a bunch of guys that you could talk about.
Definitely. Yeah. Yeah, and I mean, we're trying to give people values that they can add to their contending teams too. If there's not question marks or things, then people are going to value those players more, and you're not going to be able to get those guys for values.
Absolutely, yeah. You're going to have to. They're going to cost you an arm and a leg.
Yeah, I mean, like you said, CJ Stroud's a good example, or any young wide receiver. Good luck trying to pry them away from a team that's rebuilding or people that just love to have young talent on their rosters.
So this episode was for contenders. Next episode is going to be for rebuilding teams. You're not going to want to miss that. Thank you so much for watching, and until next time.